There are two people in your social circle right now. You probably know both of them without even trying to think of names. One of them is everywhere. LinkedIn announcements, new title every 18 months. Always somewhere impressive to be. Always something to report when someone asks what they are up to. From the outside, this person is clearly on track. Clearly moving in the right direction. Clearly winning. The other one is harder to place. Quieter. Working fewer hours than before. Driving the same car they had 3 years ago. Saying no to things everyone else is saying yes to. And when people ask how they are doing, their answer is fine. But their life does not look like it is expanding the way a life is supposed to expand. Not visibly, anyway. And the social consensus forms very quickly around both of them. One is winning. One is, well, people are a little worried about the other one. Here is the question nobody in that social circle is actually asking. What if the consensus is completely wrong? What if the person everyone is quietly concerned about is the one who actually figured something out? Something about how the brain works, something about what a life costs, something about what the race is actually running toward. That the person getting all the announcements has not figured out yet? What if looking like you are falling behind and actually getting free are, sometimes, exactly the same thing from the outside? Welcome to Psychology Learnma. Today, we are going inside something that almost no one talks about honestly. The psychology of people who quietly exit the rat race, while the people around them are still trying to understand what happened. Not because they gave up, not because they failed, but because something shifted inside them, something specific and documentable and deeply psychological. And once it shifted, the race stopped looking like the only direction worth moving. Before anything else, one thing needs to be said clearly. This video is not about quitting. It is not a case for laziness or financial irresponsibility or walking away from ambition entirely. The people we are looking at today did not stop caring. They started caring about something different. And the space between those two things, that space is the entire psychology of what we are exploring today. And here is something worth holding on to as we go. The internal shift that makes this possible is not a personality type. It is not something you are born with or without. It gets triggered by something specific, and once it does, the brain starts processing the race in a way that is genuinely, measurably different from before. That is exactly where we are starting. Here is something the race never tells you about itself. It is not a conspiracy. It is not something imposed on unwilling people by some system working against them. The rat race is effective because it is perfectly aligned with something genuinely old and genuinely real inside the human brain. And until you understand that, until you actually see why the race feels like gravity rather than a choice, you cannot fully understand what it means to step off it. For most of human history, your position in the social group was not a vanity metric. It was a survival variable. Higher status in the tribe meant more access to resources, better protection, greater probability of making it through a genuinely dangerous world. The brain learned, across hundreds of thousands of years, to treat climbing as necessary. Not important, necessary. The same neural pathways that respond to food and physical safety respond to social advancement. The brain does not distinguish between them cleanly. It just knows. Moving up feels like surviving, and falling behind feels like threat. Modern work environments did not create this drive. They simply built an extraordinarily efficient delivery system for it. Performance reviews, title upgrades, salary bands, quarterly bonuses, each one triggering a real neurological reward, each one producing a genuine, measurable hit of satisfaction. And then, and this is the part that never gets explained clearly enough, each one fading, quickly, completely, until the baseline resets and the brain starts scanning for the next level. Psychologists studying human motivation call this hedonic adaptation. The brain normalizes every new achievement, every new acquisition, every new marker of progress with remarkable speed. What once felt like a rival becomes the new floor within weeks or months, and from that new floor, the next level becomes visible, and the running continues. Not because the person is greedy or shallow or lacking in self-awareness, but because the system they are inside was designed, very deliberately, to never produce a permanent sense of enough. This is important to understand not as a criticism of the people still running. They are not wrong. They are not brainwashed. They are responding, very rationally, to a system that speaks directly to something evolutionarily ancient inside them. The race is not the villain of this story. It is just, for some people, at some point, no longer the right direction. And what changes that is not a decision. It is a moment. Most people assume the exit from the race comes from burnout. Enough bad days accumulating until the person finally breaks and walks away from the whole thing. And sometimes that is part of it. But the exits that actually stick, the quiet ones, the ones that do not reverse 6 months later, almost never start with exhaustion alone. They start with something quieter and more permanent than exhaustion. They start with a calculation, not a dramatic one, not a breakdown in the bathroom or a conversation that changes everything in a single afternoon. Just a moment, often an ordinary one, where a person looks at the full equation for the first time. Not this month's equation, not this year's, the whole life's equation. The accumulated cost of the race in time, in health, in presence, in the texture of daily life, measured honestly against what the race is actually offering at the end of it. And the answer that comes back is wrong. Not slightly off. Fundamentally wrong. The numbers do not balance. This is not the same as giving up. This distinction matters more than almost anything else in this video. Giving up comes from not wanting to try anymore. This calculation comes from trying long enough and honestly enough to actually see what the numbers add up to. It requires more information than the person had before, more clarity. And it requires more courage to act on, not less. Researchers who study major life transitions describe this as a values realignment event, the moment when what the brain has been trained to treat as rewarding, status, external validation, measurable achievement, stops producing sufficient evidence of a life that feels genuinely worthwhile. And something else begins to pull. Something that does not come with a title or a salary band, something harder to name. A life that actually feels like theirs. Here is what this looks like in an ordinary moment. Someone sitting in a performance review that goes well. The numbers are strong, the manager is pleased, the bonus is confirmed. And sitting in that chair, receiving exactly what they worked for, something unexpected happens. They feel nothing. Not tired, not resentful, not ungrateful. Just empty in the precise place where satisfaction should be. And that emptiness carries more information than any amount of external success ever did. It is the calculation arriving. Quiet, specific, undeniable. And once that calculation has been done honestly, once that answer has come back, something changes in how the race looks. It stops feeling like gravity. It starts feeling like a choice. And that is an entirely different relationship with the running. But here is what nobody prepares you for. The moment the calculation changes is not the hard part. What comes after it? What the brain actually goes through in the weeks and months that follow the exit. That is where the real psychology begins. The people who step off the race do not step into peace. Not immediately. They step into something more complicated than that. And the race itself has a very specific interest in keeping this part invisible. Because if people knew what the exit actually felt like in the early stages, far fewer would attempt it. The first thing that goes is the most disorienting. For years, possibly decades, the answer to what do you do has been quietly doing double duty. It was answering a professional question, but it was also answering a much deeper one. Who are you? The title was not just a description of work. It was a daily confirmation of value, direction, and place. It told you where you stood. It gave other people a way to understand you. It gave you a way to understand yourself without having to go looking for something harder to find. When that external confirmation disappears or changes into something less legible to the people around you, the self does not automatically fill the space with something new. There is a real and disorienting period of not quite knowing how to answer the deeper question anymore. Not because the answer is not there, but because the old shortcut to it has been removed. The second thing is the social cost. And this one surprises people more than almost anything else. When someone exits the race, they do not just change their own life. They accidentally become a question that everyone around them has to answer about their own choices. And some people find that question very uncomfortable to sit with. The judgment that follows is rarely cruel. It is defensive. The person who stayed in the race needs the person who left to be struggling. Because if they are not, if stepping off turns out to be genuinely fine, or better than fine, then the price of staying becomes something the person still running cannot look at directly. So the concern is real, but it is not entirely about you. It is about what your choice reflects back at the choices of the people watching. The third thing is stranger than either of those. The scoreboard goes dark. Inside the race, there is always a metric, a number, a rank, a way to know with reasonable certainty whether a week was good or a year was successful. When the race ends, that external measurement system disappears. And the brain, which has been trained for years to use those external signals as its primary way of evaluating progress, does not immediately know how to function without them. What was a good day? How do you know if you are moving in the right direction? The freedom of not being measured is real. But before it feels like freedom, it feels like standing in a room where all the lights went out at once. The room has not changed. You just cannot see it yet. And underneath all three of those losses is a fourth thing, the quietest, and in some ways, the most important. The question the race was preventing. When the busyness stops, when every hour is no longer pre-filled with the structure the race provides, something arrives in the space it used to occupy. Not peace, not immediately. A question, the one the race was, very efficiently, keeping at a safe distance. What do I actually want from this life? And for many people, hearing that question clearly for the first time after decades of running is not a relief. It is confronting, because they do not know the answer. And realizing they do not know, that is the beginning of something. But it does not feel like a beginning at first. It feels like standing in the dark. Here is what nobody in the race tells you. The dark does not last. The people who stay with the disorientation long enough, who do not run back to the race the moment the scoreboard goes dark, find that something begins to grow in the space the race used to fill. It does not arrive with an announcement. It does not feel like a breakthrough. It comes quietly, gradually, in the ordinary texture of days that are now structured differently. But it is real, and it changes things in ways that are genuinely difficult to explain to someone who has not felt it yet. The first thing that changes is the relationship with time. Inside the race, time is a resource. Something finite and always running low. You manage it, protect it, optimize it, feel guilty when it feels wasted. You are always aware of how much of it is going where, but you never quite inhabit it. Off the race, something shifts. Time stops being a resource and starts being a medium. Something you move through rather than something you are always trying to get more of. People who have made this transition describe the same phenomenon. Their weeks become memorable again. Individual days have specific texture. A Tuesday 3 weeks ago is something they can actually tell you about. When they were running, the weeks blurred together into a single, sustained forward motion. Now there is detail. Now there is texture. Now there is, for the first time in a long time, something that feels like actually being present in their own life. The second thing is that decisions start to belong to them. Inside the race, personal choices are quietly shaped by enormous external pressure. What looks right? What the next logical step is supposed to be? What will be legible and respectable to the people watching? Even choices that feel personal carry the fingerprints of the race's expectations. Off the race, that pressure drops, and decisions begin to feel different, lighter, more specifically and recognizably theirs. The question shifts from "what should I do" to "what do I actually want?" And the answer, when it arrives without performance pressure distorting it, is often simpler than expected. More specific, less impressive to announce, but more honestly aligned with the person asking it. The third shift is the strangest and the hardest to explain without it sounding like a platitude. The definition of enough changes. Not because the person lowered their standards, but because the baseline for what registers as genuinely satisfying quietly recalibrates. An unhurried afternoon starts to feel rich in a way it never did before. A conversation with no agenda, no networking purpose, no outcome to produce, that starts to carry real weight. A morning with nothing scheduled does not feel like wasted time. It feels like exactly the right use of it. This is not poverty thinking. This is not resignation. It is a genuine expansion of what counts as a full life, independent of what the race was defining as success. And underneath all of it, something that almost every person who has made this transition tries to describe and struggles to find the right words for. A sense of finally being inside their own life, not performing a version of it for an external audience, not working toward a future version of it where things will finally be okay, but present, specifically, genuinely present, in the actual current texture of it, as if the race was always running adjacent to their real life, and stepping off finally closed the distance between where they were and where they actually were. The race keeps you watching your life from slightly outside it, evaluating, comparing, planning the next move. Off the race, the distance closes. You stop watching and start inhabiting. And the difference, quiet as it is, turns out to be everything. There is something the race does to protect itself, something very effective and almost entirely invisible. It controls the language of courage. Inside the race, staying is framed as strength. Pushing through is framed as resilience. Working harder than you want to, longer than is sustainable, in a direction you are no longer certain you believe in, that gets called commitment, dedication, not giving up. And leaving, stepping off, slowing down, choosing less visible work, saying no to the next level, that gets called quitting, opting out, not being able to hack it. This framing is so deeply embedded in how we talk about ambition that most people accept it without examining it. But let us actually look at what each path requires. Staying in the race comes with a built-in infrastructure, clear metrics, a scoreboard that tells you whether a week was good, external validation arriving at regular intervals, bonuses, reviews, promotions, titles that confirm you are on track, a community of people doing the same thing who will recognize and reward your effort. Even on the hardest days, you know where you stand. You know what winning looks like. You know how to measure progress. The race is hard, but it provides the tools for navigating itself. Leaving removes all of that, and what it asks instead, what it genuinely, concretely requires, is something the race never develops in the people who stay in it. Because the race never asks them to. It asks you to tolerate being misread by people you love, by people whose opinions once shaped how you understood yourself, and to keep going without correcting them, because the correction would require explaining something that has no impressive language yet. It asks you to sit with financial anxiety that is real and legitimate, not imaginary, not irrational, and to make decisions from a place of considered judgment rather than from fear. Every day, without a bonus arriving at the end of the quarter, to confirm you made the right call. It asks you to face the identity question directly. Who am I when the title disappears? Who am I when there is nothing impressive to report? And to sit with the discomfort of not having a clean answer, without running back to the race just because the race offers one. It asks you to build internal measures of a good life in a world that only teaches external ones. To know a day was worthwhile without anyone else confirming it. To trust your own read of your own experience in the absence of a scoreboard. This is not easier than running. It is genuinely harder. And the people who have done it, who have stayed with the disorientation, built their own measures, tolerated the misreading, will tell you the same thing consistently. Not that it was comfortable, but that it was theirs. And that turns out to matter more than comfortable in ways they did not anticipate. The race frames leaving as the easy path. But leaving is only easy if you go back. Staying gone, staying honest about why you left, staying committed to building something that cannot be announced at a dinner party. That takes more from a person than the race ever asked. That is not giving up. That is one of the harder things a person can actually do. And it almost never gets recognized as such, because the race controls the language, and the language says they just could not hack it. But you know differently now, so let us come back to the two people we started with, the one with the announcements, the one who is harder to place. You have spent the last 17 minutes inside the psychology of both of them. And something has shifted in how you are reading the picture now, because you have information the social consensus does not have. You know that the race is not a conspiracy. It is a neurological system that speaks directly to something ancient and real inside every human brain, and staying in it is not weak or wrong. It is a completely rational response to a system that was designed to feel like the only option. You know that the exits that stick do not come from giving up. They come from a calculation, honest, specific, and often arrived at in a completely ordinary moment, where the full equation finally comes back wrong. And acting on that calculation takes more from a person than the race ever asked of them. You know what the exit actually costs in the early stages. The identity that goes quiet, the social pressure that arrives, the scoreboard going dark, the question appearing in the silence that the race was preventing. None of that is failure. All of it is the price of moving towards something that is genuinely yours. And you know what grows in the space the race used to fill. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily and specifically. A relationship with time that finally feels like inhabiting rather than managing. Decisions that belong to the person making them. A recalibrated sense of what enough actually means. And something underneath all of it that has no impressive name but feels, finally, like being present in your own life. Here is the thing about the person who looks like they are falling behind. They are not falling behind. They are playing a different game. One with no scoreboard, no external confirmation, no quarterly review telling them they're on track. A game where they had to write the rules themselves, in the dark, without an audience. And that game, the one nobody applauds, is genuinely harder than the one everyone can see. If something in this landed, if one moment felt less like psychology and more like something you have been carrying without a name for it, leave it in the comments. Not because it is easy to say out loud, just because naming it is where something starts to move. This is Psychology Learnma. We take the quiet, complicated, often unnamed parts of how people actually navigate their lives, and we look at them honestly. Not to tell you what to do, just to help you see more clearly than before. Subscribe if that is useful to you. There is a lot more here worth exploring. And the next time you see someone who looks like they are falling behind, take a second look, because you know now what that can actually mean.